Oh my gosh, it is so windy and cold up here. It's the dead of winter, and as you can see, I'm not in Puerto Rico anymore. So whose idea was it to come up here and do a long exposure in the middle of winter? Oh yeah, it was mine. All right, so why in the world am I out here? Well, I just got sent a really cool filter. We've done so many filters before that these things don't really excite me anymore, but check this out. Look how quick and easy that was. This is a 6-stop neutral density filter made by Freewell, and as far as I can tell, this is the first one I've ever used where it works with magnets. So this is a pretty big game changer, because if you've ever shot through a lighting event with a camera on a tripod, early in the day, like right now, you might want longer exposures with the neutral density filter, but at some point, the light's gonna get so low and your exposures are gonna get so long that you're going to need to take off your filter. And you don't want to bump your camera while taking off your filter and then all of your images aren't aligned anymore. So what Freewell has done that's pretty ingenious is they've added magnets to their filter, and then they have this little threaded filter that holds it on that you can leave on your camera permanently. It also has this nice little red foil around it so that you know which lenses have this attached. When the filter's off, you can just use it like a normal camera. Your lens cap will fit right on there. But then if you ever want to add a filter, it just snaps right on there and you're good to go. So from what I can tell, this recess and these magnets hold this thing on really nice and snug. I don't think you have to worry about this thing falling off. Now my lens cap also fits on their ring, but they also send you a lens cap too that uses the magnet system, which is really nice. But enough about the filter, let me tell you what I'm trying to do tonight. I've always wanted to take a really interesting image of the Ravenel Bridge here in Charleston. It's the most cliche overshot thing in the world, but this new parking deck was just built a few years ago, and I think it offers for a really unique perspective. One, I can capture the entire bridge with the sun setting behind it, but also this position allows me to capture traffic as it goes across the bridge. Normally, if you're on a boat or you're at ground level, the traffic's above you, you can't really see it. So my thought here is to put the camera on a tripod, do some long exposures early in the evening when I need a neutral density filter, and then maybe later I'll take this off and see what the image would look like if we waited to get the shot perfect in camera. It has been a long time since my hands have literally been freezing, but here we are. I've set up a composition. I've been using live view so that I can kind of see what I need to do without looking through the viewfinder, since the camera is up a little bit higher than my head. It's definitely something I use all the time. But I have my camera set to f8, the lowest ISO, and with those settings, the goal is to get the longest shutter possible so that I get the cars to streak across the frame. So let me go ahead and take a shot at 2.5 seconds, which is a pretty good length to get car trails. And you can see the whole scene is overexposed. It looks great to my natural eyes, but at a 2.5 second exposure, it's way too bright. Now, I could go all the way to f22. Let's see what that looks like. And that actually is kind of the effect that I want, but as all professional photographers know, you don't want to set your camera all the way down to f22. It's going to do two things. First of all, you're going to get a less sharp image due to diffraction, but also if you have any dust or anything on your sensor, or maybe a scratch on your lens, f22 has so much depth of field that all of those imperfections are going to show up in your final image, and it's just more post-production that you're going to have to do. And the third problem is I actually might want to shoot with more than 2.5 seconds of a shutter. If I have very little traffic on the bridge like I do right now, I might actually need 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 seconds to get the car trails that I want. So instead of shooting at f22, I'm going to go ahead and go down to f8. And f8 is typically the sweet point where you get a lot of depth of field, so your image has a lot of sharpness to it, but you're also going to get the sharpest part of your lens because you're stopping down a little bit, but you're not stopping down all the way to f22. So as you can see, we have an image where the sky is completely blown out, but if you zoom in closely, you can see some car trails which look really nice. So in order to solve this problem, I am going to add a neutral density filter. This is a 6-stop filter, and that's gonna allow me to take the same picture, and it's gonna be drastically lower in exposure. It's almost too low. So there's several things that I could do here. I could either drag my shutter more, or I could raise my ISO, or I could open my lens up a little bit. I am going to choose to open my ISO up just a bit and go to, let's go to ISO 200. This is looking a little bit better. I'm going to further drag my shutter just a little bit. Let's go to 4 seconds. And now you can see I have an image that looks a lot like the image shot at f/22, but I'm shooting with much more optimal camera settings, shooting at f8, ISO 200, in 4 seconds. Now, if you look at this image, there's one kind of problem that I'm having, and that is we have not reached the peak of blue hour. The best time to shoot at the peak of blue hour is going to be where the artificial lights from the bridge match the same intensity as the setting light in the sky. And right now we have too much natural light in the sky, but the artificial light just isn't quite bright enough. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna shoot through this event. Maybe in about 10 or 20 minutes, we'll get to that point where the lights match up perfectly. We'll be able to get our long exposure. And then as it gets even darker, I'm going to have to take this filter off and play around with just getting everything right in camera without all of the sunlight in the sky. So it's been a few minutes. The sky is definitely getting darker. I don't think we're perfectly at that right moment of blue hour, but one thing that I can do while the neutral density filter is on is I can drag my shutter much longer than I could at this very moment without the filter. Let's go all the way to 20 seconds and see what this looks like. The goal here really is to still be shooting while there's some light in the sky. Obviously, you can do 20-second exposures in the dead of night, but you're not gonna have any definition, and suddenly everything that's black in your frame is going to blend in with the black sky, and you're gonna lose all that contrast. As you can see here, we still don't quite have the lights on the bridge yet, but everything looks pretty good with the traffic. Now, one thing that's nice to do right about now is drag your shutter really long, maybe 20 seconds, maybe even 2 minutes, and you're going to get a nice smoothing effect on the water. If I wait too long, my water is gonna go completely black, and I'm gonna miss that chance to get that element in one single frame. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go all the way to 30 seconds, I'm gonna go past bulb, and I'm gonna go to this time. I'm gonna go ahead and take a picture, and now I'm gonna go to my timer. I'm gonna set this for 2 minutes and hit start. And in 2 minutes, I'm gonna have an exposure where I don't even need an intervalometer to take the photo with. Man, my hands are frozen. It's not just the cold, it's the wind out here. I mean, it is ripping right now. All right, so as you can see, if we zoom in, ooh, it is cold. To the water. I'm still getting that nice smoothing effect while also getting a lot of traffic. The one problem that I have is, of course, the night we come out to film and do this photo, there's no clouds in the sky. So you could also imagine at 20 seconds or even a 2-minute exposure, if we had some clouds in the sky, we'd also get that really nice motion blur that I think would add a lot more drama and interest to this photograph. But I do love the perfect gradient. I mean, there's not a single cloud at all, which is kind of cool, but maybe we could take this image into post-production and see if we could drop in a different sky. All right, so I think we are well past the blue hour now. I took a couple images with the filter off just so that you can see what a long exposure looks like, only using the camera settings. It's kind of cool, but I don't like the sky being this black. So the final image that I have here I think is pretty cool. It's got a nice gradient to it, but the shot I really wanted had a much different sky. Let's go into post-production and let's see if we can add a different sky to give the final effect that I really thought I was gonna accomplish tonight. So here we are in the post-production studio. This is actually David's office here in Charleston, but it's the next day. I've warmed up a little bit and I thought it would be fun to open this image in Luminar AI. Now, disclaimer, Luminar AI is a sponsor of this video, but I thought it'd be interesting to see if, one, I could do just a few tweaks to make this image look as good as possible, but two, see if we could also maybe replace the sky with something that was more in the vision of what I had, since there were no clouds in the sky at all. So let's jump into the computer right here. I'm gonna go ahead and click this Add Photos button. We're gonna come up here to Add Folder. Let's open Best Raws and select Folder. Now these are the 3 best images that I thought that I captured last night. Let me go ahead and change this to largest so that you can see these a little bit better. Here's my favorite image of the day, and this one I like the most because you can still see some detail in the water. We still have the nice long exposure so you can see all the car trails, and we have a pretty good balance of the natural light with the artificial light there on the bridge. So let me click on the next image that I took, and you can see just a few minutes later, I think this was shot 10 minutes later, we already have a lot of darkening in the sky, but you can see the difference with the water. We're losing all those nice highlights on the water, and I don't think this really works out quite as well. Now, about 20 minutes later, I took off the neutral density filter that allowed me to get all those settings, and I was able to drop my ISO all the way down to the lowest setting on this camera. I think it's like ISO 64 or 30, somewhere around there. I still stayed at f8. I didn't want to change my aperture setting, but to get a correct exposure, I had to change my shutter down to 20 seconds. Any longer and the artificial light would have been completely blown out, but as you can see here, I've lost all of the cool detail in the water. My sky is almost completely black. In some ways, the traffic isn't quite as dramatic in this shot as it is, say, here. So I think this is a great example of why using a neutral density filter is really handy late in the day when you still want to get a lot of colors, but you need a longer exposure without waiting until it gets pitch black and all of a sudden you've lost all the color in your sky. So I'm going to edit this earlier image so that I get that nice color in the water. Let's come over here. We're currently in the edit portal, but let's go over here to templates. This is the newest thing that Luminar AI has added to their software. And the idea behind templates is that the software is going to use artificial intelligence to determine what kind of image this is. We can see here that it is suggesting that this is a sunset, which is exactly what it is. So I'm going to choose sunsets because the software correctly predicted that that's what this is. Let me click on that. And then it gives me 5 different presets here. Of course, I can create my own and I can tweak these a little bit, but this preset is adding a lot of purple tones into the frame, which I really like, but it's also done a sky replacement, which we might do here in a minute. I'm actually going to go with this one, and let's go over to edit. And I believe if I come down here to creative and go to sky, and I can turn this off, and that's going to allow me to still use the template without using the sky replacement at the moment. So this is a pretty good starting point here. And if I come up here to the Essentials tablet, you can see these little dots next to a few of them. Those are the filters that have been applied to this template. So if I come to Enhance, I can see that they've added an accent AI just a little bit, 30%. If I come to Structure, they've bumped that up a little bit. If I come down to color, you can see it looks like they've done nothing here, but we have this little drop-down menu that we can do. And you can see they've messed around with the hue, saturation, and lightness sliders. We can tweak all of that as well. Basically, you can do everything you want, and then you could either save this as a new template, or you can use the pre-existing ones, which makes your life really easy if you find yourself doing the same edits over and over again. I'm going to come down here to light. And I think I can bring out some detail in the shadows a little bit more. I don't want to go too crazy because that starts to look really, really fake. But I do want to accentuate the water and some of the highlights that are on the side of the bridge here. And at any given time, I can come back here to history and I can see what I did just by toggling between these two. So we went from here to here. I think that looks really great. Let's go back to our adjustments. If I want to tweak it just a little bit more, I can come down to curves and maybe I just want to pull down the blacks just a touch, pull up the highlights just a touch as well. And that's going to add just a little bit of contrast. Maybe the highlights in my car trails are just a little too bright, so I might take the highest point and bring it down just a touch. Something like that looks pretty good. So as you can see with your tools, your creative tools, your portrait tools, your professional tools, there's a lot of things that you can do here. And Luminar AI is definitely one of the most powerful pieces of software that I've ever used for photo editing. But what Luminar AI is really trying to do is make your life simpler by automating a lot of this and not actually going through and tweaking every single little thing. I mean, I could stay in here and edit this file for an hour, but that's not really the point of this software. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm at a pretty good stopping point here. This overall exposure looked great, and then adding that one template I think really brought this thing to life. I'm going to try to add a different sky and just see if I can get something that looks pretty good without using the natural sky that was there. One thing that's really cool about Luminar is they allow you to insert your own custom skies so that you don't have to just use the 10 or 20 presets that they have. I'm going to be using a sky that Mike Kelly created in our tutorial we did with him called Sky Replacement. You can find that at fstoppers.com/store. Let me show you the file that he has here. It's kind of shot at the same time of day, and the sun is setting just outside the frame here on the left. So this is a really good candidate for creating a sky that matches the environment that we were just shooting in. But because I used a neutral density filter and I have that blurred effect on the car trails and the water, I thought it would be cool to take this image and put a motion blur on it so that it would match the same sort of result that you would get if the neutral density filter was on the camera and the sky looked like this, which is what I was hoping for. So this is the image that I have blurred and now I'm going to use in Luminar. So as you can see now, it has applied this sky and it has put a gradient on it. And one tricky thing about this image is that because the bridge spans over the horizon, the mask is going to have trouble trying to figure out where the horizon is and blend in the sky below the bridge. And you can see that right here. So in order to try to get this to look smooth, I think the best course of action is to just remove my fake sky all the way through the bridge and kind of treat the bridge as a way to obstruct where that transition happens. So the way that I can do that is if I come here to Add Mask and I go to the Eraser tool, the radius here chooses how large my brush is, so I want it to be pretty big so that it's affecting broad areas, and then the softness of the brush will affect this inside circle, which is determining how hard the edge of the brush is. So I want it to be really soft, so I'm going to move that all the way to the right. I'm going to bring my opacity down to maybe like 31, and then I'm going to just paint a little bit here. If I hold my cursor down, it shows me the mask, and it lets me see exactly where I'm applying the effect to. Might be able to come over here and just add a little bit more. I just want to smooth out that transition there. And then the final thing I might do is come down here to Sky Global, and this is kind of the overall mixing of my sky. If I go all the way to the left, you can see here it turns the sky off completely. If I go all the way to the right, it's going to make the sky the strongest it possibly could be. So I think somewhere right around like 70 is a good place where it doesn't look too crazy. So there you go, final image with the sky and without the sky. I think these both turned out pretty cool. I would be curious to go back out and see if I could get an image with a neutral density filter where the sky is naturally streaking across. That'd be pretty cool. But I hope you guys found this tutorial exciting and interesting. Maybe you learned something from it. And if you want to check out Luminar, make sure you go to the link in the description below. You can do a trial there. It's very inexpensive, and unlike other software like Photoshop and Lightroom, you're not having to pay a subscription service. You can just buy it and own it outright and then use it as much or as little as you like. If you've never worked with a neutral density filter, I definitely recommend going out and getting one, trying some longer exposures. It's always fun to see what kind of effects you will get. And of course, you can always try these from Freewell. This is the first filter system I've ever seen that has the magnets in it. That's extremely useful. I'm probably just going to leave this little adapter on my lens all the time, and then I just have this, I can pop it right on. Very cool, and it makes changing filters really easy, especially if you need to do long exposures with the filter, but then also transition into more complex photography by removing the filter and then doing different blending. If you want to learn from some of the best photographers, including Elia Liccardi, who does a lot of this kind of stuff where he's blending different moments in time, head over to fstoppers.com/store where you can check out the really thorough tutorials we've done with him called Photographing the World. And make sure you subscribe to our channel below because we release videos like this all the time. I'm actually about to get a haircut, head back to Puerto Rico, so hopefully I'll be making more videos than I have over the Christmas holiday. But hope you guys enjoy this. See you guys soon, and thanks for watching.